JC Peeps, welcome back to the Junction City Podcast. We have with us in the Octagon today, Katie Matheson, Communications Director of Alliance for a Better Utah. I even have Dan and John. Like, look at this, man. Like, this segment is growing up.
Right?
Yeah.
This is awesome.
I'm such a fan of what Katie brings. I had to come see it for myself.
She does make the segment. I'm not going to lie. Without her, the segment doesn't exist.
Oh, yeah.
So we're back this week to talk a little bit more about, just give you a week 4 update on what's been happening down on the Hill. So we'll have a few bills that have made their way through committee that we'll talk about. We'll have some updates for you. And then the biggest piece we're going to talk about here is the announcement that came out on Friday that it looks like there's probably going to be an attempt to repeal Proposition 4, which was the Better Boundaries Act.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So for those of you, the JC Peeps, who don't know what Proposition 4 was, it created an independent commission to craft a map that would draw legislative districts in Utah based upon data and neighborhood makeup, not just partisanship, which is how it is now. So it was pretty much an anti-gerrymandering ballot initiative. So instead of legislators picking their voters, we finally go back to voters picking their legislators, which would, I would say, I mean, is it fair to say that would dilute the power of probably the supermajority of the Utah GOP?
Oh,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, I think that Nate Silver is the national
538.
data. Yeah, 538. He does
Yeah.
lots of data. I think that they did a whole gerrymandering project, and I think they said we've got somewhere around like 4.5 seats that are gerrymandered for Republicans in Utah. So it's not. It's not
4.5 seats?
Yeah, it's
That's
not as
surprising.
bad as like North Carolina, whose
Right.
like democracy status has been downgraded
It's
by
egregious.
international groups because it's so bad, but
Huh.
it's also not great. So
Huh. Well, and just to jump back 10 years, I mean, as the political veteran here.
Hey, I was around for
Whoa,
for
throwing
fair
your weight
boundaries.
around.
Yeah, I was around for fair boundaries. Come on, man.
Yeah, this happened
lived here,
in
John.
2010. The same thing happened. There was a citizen initiative to have. They did a petition so that they could create an independent commission to create the district boundaries, and then after that got a bunch of support. The state legislature basically decided to just make their own version of that still gave them plenty of control over the process, and they subverted the will of the people back then. And so,
Well,
the
I thought
fact-
that the problem with fair boundaries was there was an issue with signatures being verified, and they disallowed so many signatures that I think that had been gathered online or something. Well, this was before your time in Utah.
I don't
But-
remember how it happened at the end of the process, except for that, like, the writing was on the wall. The people support this. And so the legislature came in and said, we don't need to do your ballot initiative. We'll give you something that does the same thing, but it didn't do
But
the
it
same
has no teeth. So
It wasn't an independent commission. It was appointed by the legislature,
Yeah,
if I remember right.
So in 2018, and I mean this, like John said, this work was happening before then. 2018, the Proposition 4 gets on the ballot in Utah, and it passes. I would say it passes with a majority of Utahns. It was
close.
Yeah, it was closer than it should have been, and I think that most folks didn't quite understand what it was.
They still don't.
Yeah, because if you explain it to them, they're like, "Oh yeah, that makes total sense. That these boundaries should be fair, and that politicians shouldn't be choosing their voters." So it passes in November 2018, and then we wait. And we've wondered ever since that passage, because immediately after, that was the same year that Proposition 2, which was the medical cannabis initiative, and also Proposition 3, which was Medicaid expansion. Those also passed in November of 2018. And immediately, Proposition 2 was gutted and changed.
And then in the next session,
our favorite, Alan Christensen, who hates your kids, immediately he sponsored the bill to change Proposition 3, which ultimately became pretty much what the voters passed anyway, right?
right.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah.
And then, like you say, we basically knew this was coming with Prop 4. It was just when would it happen? And here
Yeah.
it is.
Well, we knew that there were conversations that were happening that had been happening with Prop 4 for a while, and so everyone was just kind of wondering what those conversations were like, what was going on, and it sounds like they finally just fell apart on Friday. So these conversations have been happening, as far as I understand, for quite a while. So, and again, my understanding is that Prop 4 really, really, really wanted to make something work. So for them to walk away like this means that it was bad.
Yeah, like what? So Better Boundaries, which is the organization that pushed the ballot initiative, they are the ones that have been in negotiation with the leadership in the state legislature. Is that who it is? And so on Friday, negotiations broke down, and like you said, if that's the case, then Republicans wanted too much.
Too much, right. I mean, if you're looking, so the hard thing is, of course, we're working without a bill, so we don't actually know what they're going to do. In the Utah policy article that broke on Friday morning, it sounds like they wanted to take out all of the so all of the requirements for what fair redistricting would be. So, Prop 4 again makes a commission, but also has added requirements for what exactly goes into making a district. So things like, it needs to be geographically contiguous as much as possible. So don't, break up counties if you can avoid it. Also things like keeping communities together. So don't split West Valley up, stuff like that. And there are a couple other things
don't
as
put
well.
Central Ogden with West Haven and Roy.
Right.
That makes no sense.
Right. And don't put the avenues with St. George in a larger district, like a congressional district. Right.
See, now that's something I don't get, because I feel like last time they did redistricting, they were saying we need to try to make these districts as inclusive as possible. We need to be including people from rural and urban areas, know. But it's spelled out specifically in
there's a list of things that you're supposed to do in order to in the Proposition 4 that this commission would have to consider. And then any map that this commission came up with, it would go to the Supreme Court justice, and he would, or she, depending on the time, would make sure that it adhered to all those rules, and then it could go then to the legislature, and the legislature would vote yay or nay. My favorite part about this is if the legislature turns down one of the maps that commission gave them, then the legislature has to put in writing why they turned it down, and then bring forward their own map that also adheres to these rules.
Right.
Yes.
So if the legislature wants to take away these rules, and also take away the ability for someone to sue over a map if it's unfair, which they want to, according to this Utah policy article, they want to take away. Basically, it's just a group of people who are going to be recommending a map to the Utah state legislature, and then they'll vote yay or nay behind closed doors.
Yeah,
right? So it's not, and we've had some criticism towards our organization for calling it a repeal. I mean, what they'll probably do is they'll probably repeal it and then give like a super, lame version to replace it. So it'll be a repeal and a replace probably, but it will be like the difference between the maps that we would get from this, version that we think that they might put forward versus not even having an independent redistricting commission at all would effectively, my guess would be nothing. Like there would be no difference
than what we currently have.
Right.
The system that's currently in place.
Right.
Like it changes, this would presumably change nothing, and we would get something similar to the districts that we had in after 2010, which, came into effect, in the 12 election, John? This was the first time that you saw those
because
districts in Weaver County?
The census was in 2010, redistricting was in 2011, so then the next election was 2012, and that's when Matheson was first elected in the 4th Congressional District.
Right. And then he didn't run again after that.
Right, because it got too hard because they made that district just rural enough. If you're super into gerrymandering, not gerrymandering. Not that you're the Utah legislature.
The Republican Party is right for you, yeah.
No, if you're super into it, I mean, it's fascinating. You can go look at the redistricting or the gerrymandering project from 538, and every single state has a couple of different maps of ways that you can draw their congressional districts, and you can draw a congressional district to gerrymander for the Republicans, you can draw one to gerrymander for the Democrats, you can draw one to be more fair, all that kind of stuff. And it's fun if you look at Utah's congressional districts. The map that is gerrymandering for Republicans is the map we have now.
Oh,
right.
And so
100%, man.
the
100%.
map that gerrymanders for the Democrats has one really safe seat in Salt Lake City, and one that is fair has a Democratic seat in Salt Lake City, but also expands outwards. So a fair map for Utah would not be a map that we have now. That's just for the congressional districts.
Yeah,
and that's not for the
state legislature. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But I mean, people who draw districts, I mean, I don't want to pretend like this is not a complicated issue. It is a very complicated issue
Yeah, it's
because
tough.
what's happening is we are naturally, as people, our migration patterns are we're segregating ourselves. And so what's happening is you have all of these more liberal leaning people moving to cities and more urban areas, and all of these more conservative folks moving to more rural areas. And so we're separating ourselves. And so it's a question of,
Well-
how much are we supposed to, how do we want these districts to look? How do we make them fair?
And I bet that happened to you when you moved to Weber County, right? People probably told you which parts of the county were, I don't know, more liberal versus. Like, I got told not to move to North Ogden. They said all of your neighbors are just going to be Mormons who will ostracize you.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, as not just in Ogden, but like as we were looking, because I came from Taylorsville, so as we were looking to move, I mean, I could get a sense, and I'm not gonna lie, like I have looked at houses, and there was some people with like that thin blue line flag, and then a giant Trump 2020 flag, and I'm like, I just can't look at this from my house, and if I do, I'm gonna paint an Elizabeth Warren sign on my lawn, like
Right.
Do it.
I ended up moving to Ogden, and I love my neighborhood, so.
Do you have any thoughts about the approach here? Like, why, if you don't have a bill, do you make an announcement like this that is expected to probably cause some problems?
Because, well, I don't really know what happened behind the scenes. It was a Utah policy thing that broke the story. They are known to rush things forward without asking all parties or
I
waiting
see.
for all parties to respond.
Right.
So my sense is that that's what happened because
This wasn't a plan, like a press release.
no.
Yeah,
So somebody talked to them and then they
Yeah. I see. Right,
and so basically Friday was everyone scrambling going, I don't know what's happening. So, but my guess is that it is easier to make the case that you are upholding the will of the people by telling people what you're doing and acting like you're concerned about constitutional arguments in a Prop 4 repeal and replace versus allowing reporters and other people who are invested in the community to look at the bill where you've crossed out all of the Prop 4 stuff and replaced it with something new, because then
Right.
the narrative gets away from you. So if you are a savvy comms person, you would
Interesting.
create the narrative first
I see.
and let people and the sponsor of the bill, Senator Bramble, is someone that we now have a fair amount of experience with, who will just say what he wants regardless of what is actually written in his bill. And so I imagine that probably had something to do with it.
So we know for sure that the bill forthcoming, so I wrote in the notes, a bill forthcoming in the Utah State Legislature would effectively repeal the will of the people. We know that it's coming from Kurt Bramble.
Yes.
Who
he
is
has a bill file.
okay, who has also run the fetal remains bill, SB
Yes.
67, which we're going to talk about here
Yes.
in a minute.
Yes.
So like you said, we've had some experience in this session about the way that he chooses
Operates,
to do
right.
business,
He's very Trumpian.
which is not good.
Very Trumpian.
He's a gaslighter. Okay, so all right, so we are going to be
Where's
watching.
he at?
He's
Just
in
curious.
Utah County.
Utah County.
He legitimately said the
Motherfucker.
words fake news about coverage of one of his bills about KUTV. And I was like, oh, all right. Well,
KUTV's fake news.
right, KUTV. A very
Sinclair is fake news to
yeah,
him.
that's what yeah.
Wow.
So
He is to the right.
he's an interesting character.
He's like, get me Alex Jones.
Yeah, for real. Get me.
You
Alex
want a
Jones.
scoop? I'll
Yeah.
only talk to Alex Jones.
No, yeah, or get me Bannon in here. I want Bannon. Okay, so one of the things that your organization, the ABU, has done is there will be a rally for Prop 4 at the Utah State Capitol building on Thursday, February 27th at noon.
Yes.
This will be on the south stairs, and it'll be from noon to 1. And the idea here is, and I heard you say this to some folks yesterday at the Weber Dems political training, the idea here is to do it during the session and to get a lot of people to show up to say, hey, we are watching. Like, this will not stand. You will not pass this through by, as a fly-by-night bill. You will not out, inland port us on this one.
Yeah.
Where we're just going to, and it's a thing.
Exactly. I mean, so last year when they repealed and replaced Prop 3 and they took that final vote, I knew that it was going to happen and there was nothing that I could do to stop it, but I felt very strongly that it was important that I and others were there to just bear witness to what was going on. And I think that similarly, in a situation like this, I think that there is still hope for this bill to be killed, especially if we can get Herbert to veto it. But I think it's very important that the legislature know that the people are watching them. And so having this during the day, also when reporters are there, is an important part of it. And I know it's really difficult. We had a lot of debates over, should we do this on a Saturday? Should we do it on the middle of the day? Should we do it at the end of the day? And ultimately this time just ended up working best. But yeah, I think it's really important that all of us come together, because the reality is that sometimes we silo ourselves into issue specific stuff, like, oh, I'm for repro rights, and oh, I'm for environment, and I'm for, economic justice. But the reality is that not a single one of those issues will move forward in the next 10 years if this isn't fixed.
Yeah.
Because at the core of all of our issues, at the core of a lot of the struggle that we've been feeling nationally and in Utah, is the fact that these lawmakers don't reflect accurately the wants and the thoughts of their constituents. And it's because these districts are cut up in such a way that they don't have to be responsive to to those people. They have to be responsive to the delegates within their party, right? And so it's super undemocratic. And if we don't fix what's wrong with democracy, we can't fix what's wrong with anything else.
Yeah.
So, like, in my dream world, if I had someone running for Congress, I would want them, I would work my ass off to work for somebody whose their only platform was climate change and fixing all the stuff that's wrong with our democracy. Money in politics, gerrymandering, voter access, stuff like that. Basically HB1.
Yeah, HB1, right.
Yeah.
Exactly. That passed, at the very beginning of this current Congress and has sat in the Senate.
Right.
With no debate.
Basically that and climate change. Like, that's what's on fire right now. And this is something that is on fire in Utah. And it's not, it's not just about Prop 2. It's not just about Prop 3. It's not just about any of those other things. It literally is about making sure that we can be heard and then moving forward those other issues, which is why it's so important that people show up.
Yeah. And so like Katie said, this affects everything else. And so if you can, show up at the rally on Thursday at noon, South Steps. And also, we're going to talk about this a little bit later as a thing to do. Reach out to you. Once the bill is public and once it begins to move through the process, make sure you are vocal to your representative. It sounds like this guy is he a senator?
Senator.
Yeah, so this bill will begin in the House. So I have the good fortune of, I moved, so I don't have to deal with Alan Christensen anymore. Lucky me.
Woo.
Yeah. So we get Greg Buxton, who I find to be a fairly reasonable guy. He votes, with the party fair amount, but not unreasonable. He's not
But
Alan
he hasn't
Christensen.
talked to Kobe and Dan.
He sure hasn't. I haven't talked to him in a while.
Oh, in a while? Oh, you've actually...
Yeah, because when I lived in Plain City, I was in his district as well.
Oh.
So then we moved. But make sure that you reach out to your representatives once this bill becomes public, because once again, like, this will affect everything else going forward if the people in power get their way
For the next decade.
for the next 10 years.
Which means the inland port is done at that point, which means, all of this growth has continued, like who knows what's happening with Roe v. Wade. I mean, climate change, all of this stuff. Now is the time. And also contact Gary Herbert's office as well.
And the governor, while he is still the governor.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. That's a big thing. So let's move on to some other bills that we have here in the rundown. I like to include some of the new bills that you all have included in the weekly updates or the daily updates. Like we've said in the past, if you want to stay up to date, go to Alliance for a Better Utah, betterutah.org, and you can sign up for their daily legislative updates. They're pretty great. This is where I pull a lot of this information, and they really do a good job of highlighting some of the most important stuff that's going on down there. This is a bill that was kind of circulating last week, and I didn't bring it up, but it seems like now is the time. So this is HB 243, Warning Labels Amendments. So this bill would require warning labels on print and digital content that could be perceived by some to be pornography. Spoiler, it won't actually be porn.
Like Deadpool.
Yeah, sure. So this bill passed the House on a 60-12 vote, and it's on to the Senate. The question I had on this bill was, who actually, if this bill passes, who makes that decision, whether it's porn or not?
I think it's decided by a court. So
The court decides?
yeah, I think. There have been a couple iterations of this bill. I was looking at it earlier today. So what I think happens is either the Attorney General's office or, fun fact, some random citizen reports
Gail Rosica.
an
What?
instance.
The worst.
Oh yes, reports an instance of this happening, and I think it has to be specifically like a minor is consuming this stuff.
Think about the children.
Literally.
Literally think about the children.
And then a court has to decide whether or not it rises to a certain level, like to the point where it's causing either like mental or emotional or even physical, I think was one of the things they said, like issues for the minor. And then
What does
if
that
it
even mean?
was,
What does that even mean?
He's jerking off, dude.
Yeah, no boners. Otherwise, we gotta put this this spoiler or
what?
this ad on
This
here.
ad or
warning label.
And at one point, I don't know if it's still in there. I didn't see it the last time I was looking through it, but it was a super short skim. I think that if they find that it is in fact harmful to minors, they can levy a fine for like up to $2,500. And if you're a citizen who has reported this, you get a portion of the.
Are you kidding
Shut
me?
up.
I'm not remember.
There's a.
That was in there at one point. I have to see if it's still in there now.
Oh my
But
gosh.
I mean, the joke has been on the Hill behind the scenes, like, okay, well, so this is going to increase porn consumption because people are going to be looking to see if, oh, go look at the porn, make sure that it make sure it has a warning label.
Yeah. Well, I was gonna say. So basically, every Karen in the southwestern part of Salt Lake County and Utah County are gonna be looking for stuff to report to make $100 or whatever it is. What a joke.
So, what is considered porn then? Just like, is that the subjective thing?
Yeah, man. Whatever your judge says,
Yeah, I think. Oh,
you'll know it
dang,
when you see it.
I think that I didn't
You will
see.
know it when you see it.
I didn't see a definition of it. I'm looking now. I didn't see a definition of it before, but I'll warn you. I'll alert you if I find it.
I thought this was
skimming
a
this bill now.
thing in the 70s when there was a whole debate about what's art and what's
What's
pornography.
Yeah, didn't The Simpsons do a whole thing on this
I
too?
feel like they did. But that's where you know it when you see it comes from. I was quoting some.
You know it when you see it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, Falwell.
Falwell
The
sucks.
Hustler. Yeah, Falwell v. Hustler.
Oh, Hustler.
Oh yes,
Yeah.
dude.
Yeah, this sounds
You know
right.
what I'm talking about?
That
Yeah.
sounds correct.
What is that movie? The People versus Larry Flint.
Yeah.
People versus Larry
The
Flint.
pervert is back. The pervert is back. That movie's hilarious.
All right. That
All
was
right.
education.
So
That was good.
one of the things
good contribution.
We did good.
one of the things I noticed on this particular bill, HB 243. So this is sponsored in the House by Brady Brammer. He's had some other questionable bills this session. But this is sponsored in the Senate by none other than Mr. Todd Weiler,
Dun,
who
dun.
firmly believes that porn is a public health crisis.
Oh
Look,
man,
Kate.
I want to.
Okay, so that thing is this story, Todd Weiler's whole porn crusade is a testament to the power of a single very determined constituent because
Really?
yeah, that's my the story that I've heard him tell is that there was one mom who kept coming to him and saying, this is a crisis. And she was relentless. And so finally he started getting more involved with it. I mean, it's,
Like, yeah, I'll call it a crisis, whatever.
I mean, I think that there's more to it than that. I think that he probably got involved with all those, like, what's the, like that new drug group?
Oh,
I don't know
Fight the new drug.
Yeah, I don't know if he was involved with them. But what I'm saying, like, there are
Oh,
groups
yeah.
out there that exist. I'm sure that he connected with them in some way, shape, or form.
I bet he has. Yeah,
They're saying that porn is
because that
new.
started in Utah, right? Like that's a Utah thing, and then it branched out from there.
Oh, I don't
Oh,
know.
I feel
like-
probably.
I feel like it's a
think
very
that that's
Utah
right.
County thing because I noticed that like a lot of people wore those shirts and stuff when I lived in Utah County.
Mhm.
But since I've moved back to Weaver County,
What shirt?
Fight the New Drug shirts. It's like an anti-porn nonprofit. Anyway, so seeing Todd Weiler's
Yeah,
name
porn
on this
is
bill,
brand new, man.
What?
so seeing
Must
Todd
be
Weiler's
pretty
name
new.
gave me an eye roll. I was like, oh great,
Good porn.
good for him.
Good porn.
So we'll see how that
That's
goes.
that stepmom stuff.
Next one was SB 121.
That's what's ruined it for everybody.
This is medical cannabis amendments. This is with from Senator Evan Vickers. So this bill removes the previous requirement that raw cannabis flowers be packaged in the blister packs, which is just kind of like this plastic. And from my understanding, like they don't actually package medical cannabis that way. So it was like a Utah specific thing. So like the cost went up. It was very stupid. Anyway, they're getting rid of
That
it.
sounds about right.
Yeah, they're getting rid of it, and then it increases.
Legislators legislating something they don't understand.
Yeah.
What
then-
we need to do here is innovate on the packs.
well,
That's gonna solve.
there's a
this
place for
problem.
that if you're in a marketing department, but not if you're in the state legislature.
Right.
Increases the number of patients a single doctor can prescribe to, and it creates an expungement process for those who may have had past charges that can now be covered under the law. So this feels like we're moving in the right direction, but it does also seem like this is pretty much what Prop 2 was initially, right?
I didn't follow the Prop 2 thing very closely as it was happening. I think that there's still an issue with the number of dispensaries.
Yeah.
So there's not enough. So it's still an access issue, but it is like, yes, this is a step towards what Prop 2 was. Just like with Prop 3, as you know, as that whole process continued to happen, it continued to get closer to the original Prop 3.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, this is not a bad thing. It could be better, but we're going in the right direction.
Right. And the idea here is that you're removing these barriers that were put in place with the Prop 2 replacement bill in December of last year, that now it's becoming easier and easier for patients to actually get what they want. And I think it also shows, once again, like the legislature trying to legislate something that they don't understand, and then as they run into barriers, they learn, oh, this is stupid, we shouldn't do this, and then they have to move back, and then relinquish some control. Because in my view, both all of these propositions are about state control of different aspects of how the state runs, and the legislature wants to retain as much as it can.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Utah's weird like that. We don't like government, but it's like if you go into like a rural area and it's like we don't like the federal government, we don't even like the state government. The highest law is the county sheriff, and everybody just thinks that they are the highest law and they are the final authority on any one given issue. So the state legislature feels that way, and they don't want even to give power to like Gary Herbert, and they don't want to give power to the federal government. They really like to just kind of put their fingerprints on everything and kind of hoard it for themselves.
Very much Ronald Reagan-esque, right? Isn't he the one that kind of brought that this way? The whole "don't trust your government."
Yeah.
Yeah,
Anti-government.
Yeah, government is the problem, which I think if you're a Democrat, that's the difference between you and your Republican friends. You believe that government can be a force for good. Republicans don't believe that. So this bill received a favorable recommendation from the Senate Health and Human Services Committee, currently on the Senate's second reading calendar, so it's moving forward. Looking forward to that.
Yeah, and I really want to just call out that it's awesome that it provides an expungement piece for people who have had past charges on this issue who would now qualify. That's a big deal. If you're sitting there and cannabis is illegal and you've got a chronic pain issue that you're trying to self-treat, I mean, that's a really good thing in here. I'm really glad to see that.
I agree. Next, I figured you'd know a lot more about this than maybe we did. This is SB 174. This just got announced last week, abortion prohibition amendments. So this bill appears to ban abortion except in the cases of rape, incest, threat to the life of the mother, or that the fetus is not viable. Can you tell us a little bit more about this, what you know? Because it seems like this is just getting going. This bill has been sort of kept back for a while. This is from Senator Dan McCay. If you know, I hate Dan McCay's positions on a lot of things.
Yeah. So this bill, I believe, would cover any abortion conception on.
Wow.
So it's not even like a 6-week.
It's not even a heartbeat bill.
Right. It is a conception moving forward. The tricky thing about this bill is that it has a trigger clause, so it would not go into effect unless Roe v. Wade was overturned, which means it is not unconstitutional, and which means we cannot sue over it.
Wow.
So that's a trend that we're seeing nationally where legislators are passing these bills. And then they have that trigger clause in there.
Because
so
they all seem to think it's a matter of when, not if.
Right.
Roe v. Wade.
Right.
They really believe when.
Right. Which is Carrie Ann Lisenby last year had her Down syndrome abortion bill the year before she ran it, and it didn't pass because everyone's like, okay, it's unconstitutional, and it would be struck down in a court and be super expensive. So then this past year, she ran it, and she had a trigger clause in it. So now that is on our books, and that would go into effect, which, and that bill would basically be like, it's illegal to have an abortion if the reason for having the abortion is that you think the fetus has a Down syndrome. And this year, they're just going all out. And yeah, they're all really chomping at the bit to be, some of them want to pass bills to trigger lawsuits, which would go up to the Supreme Court, which would be the reason for overturning Roe v. Wade. Like they
Right.
want to create that lawsuit. This is not that. What this would do is just like when that case, whatever that case is, goes through, then immediately I think the Utah legislature would convene and like put this into effect. It's hard to describe how horrific this bill is. And I know that we kind of become immune to conversations about abortion. Like it's a little bit of a joke. Like, oh, you know, we're going to debate an abortion. Oh, and everybody loses their minds because everybody has really strong opinions about abortion. But this would be horrific if it passed. I honestly don't know if it will pass because of the trigger clause in it. It may be that people feel this is a great election year bill to vote for, to signal to your base, to your Republican base, and then it doesn't actually feel like it has any consequences because there's no lawsuit. So
That's my worry.
what happens, of course, is, you know, you get asked like, why does it matter that we pass this? Why is it horrific if there's a trigger clause? Because it's not going to go into effect now. And of course, the response must be like, because human rights should not be a patchwork from state to state, and people shouldn't be living with the threat of this over their heads.
Yeah.
You know, like it is deeply, deeply disturbing to me that this is a bill that he is running.
Yeah. He's been on this crusade, so we will see how that goes. This bill will move on to probably the Senate Health and Human Services Committee is my guess.
Mm-hmm.
It'll be there if it makes it out of rules. I don't know if it's made it out of rules yet. So.
I have not. I mean, we got news of this. I got news of this Friday night as I was driving home from work. So I have,
pretty
with Prop 4 and this bill came out on the same day, and it's just been like, it's been a wild weekend. So yeah, I'm not sure about the status of it right now. But if it does go to Health and Human Services, on the Senate side, I don't have high hopes for it because we've had a bill go through there this session, an abortion bill, and it wasn't great. So.
Yeah. Okay, just a few more things before we wrap up here. So they got some numbers last week on the budget, how this is going to look, and it looks like they're going to be about $841 million in the education fund for this year. It looks like the ledge is going to appropriate about half of that. Just a quick question: does it sound like they're going to provide some sort of small tax cut there? Because it seemed like they were saying we're going to appropriate about $450 million of those dollars, but then what are they going to do with the rest? Because that money has to stay in the education fund.
Right. I bet that they'll give a tax cut. I haven't heard anything, but that's my guess.
I haven't either, because they were waiting for these numbers to come forth before they could plan anything, because tax reform was repealed.
Yeah, it's hard to stop a Republican from giving a tax break or a tax cut in an election year. It's just like they were talking about cutting checks when they were trying to, like, literally sending people checks when they were trying to make the tax reform bill sound great.
Well,
so they
that's a
really,
PR
really,
thing.
really want to prove how good they are by giving people money.
Yeah. Okay, and then just some updates on bills that we've talked about before. So surprisingly, SB 74, which was Senator Derek Kitchen's low-income family planning services bill, it made it out of rules, and it made it through the Health and Human Services Committee. This is the one where they just adjourned and didn't vote. Mm-hmm. They voted. It passed out of the Health and Human Services Committee. Now it's currently on the Senate's second reading calendar.
Yay!
Yeah.
That's a good bill.
That is a good bill. So if you don't remember, that bill provides contraception and family planning services to families who are up to 250% of the federal poverty line.
Mm-hmm.
Next, HB 213. This is Representative Angela Romero's bill to create a task force to study issues surrounding the disappearance of Indigenous women, girls, and LGBTQ plus members of the community. That passed the House on a 53-15 vote, so it is off to the Senate.
Yay! I'm disturbed by how many votes against it there were.
Like
this is an easy one.
It's an easy one. Yeah, and I think that the daily legislative update said that like 15 men decided to vote against this. So
I think that there were some women too.
Oh, okay.
Wait, did I tell the story about the committee hearing on this one where Rep. Strong said, "All right, but what about the men?"
Yeah, and you're like, oh, wow.
Oh gosh.
Yeah, jeez. SB 67, we've been following this one for a few weeks now. This is the fetal remains bill that Katie testified in the hearing in committee. It's currently back to the House Rules Committee and due to a substitution. Any idea what that might be?
There is, it's a fiscal note question.
Okay, so it's a money issue.
Yeah. And who knows what it will be, because every time we deal with this bill, we get a new one.
Yeah, and this is also from Bramble, right? Kurt Bramble.
This is also from Bramble. There is a great piece in the Salt Lake Tribune Sunday's paper about this bill, but like all the abortion bills that we're seeing. And Bethany Rogers, who wrote the piece, said that Bramble has hung up on the funeral directors group 3 times. Like, he does not want to hear from them. And what they were trying to tell him was that his provision for doing mass cremation to save money, because everyone's like, oh, it's going to cost too much, so we did a mass cremation bit, is unethical. They can't do it.
Hugely unethical. So we, because at its core, this bill is all about the sanctity of human life, right? But we're also basically going to throw a bunch of, what you claim to be people's bodies into a de facto mass grave and turn on the oven. Ooh, it's complete garbage.
Cremation. He wants to do mass cremation.
Because it would be too expensive, and so he wants to do it this way, which totally flies in the face of what he said the bill is about in the first place. It's complete garbage. This guy's a gaslight. Okay, final 2. SB 92, this is a statewide freight and passenger rail study, passed the Senate, so it's off to the House.
Woohoo!
Yeah, that's Jake Anderegg coming through. And then finally, HB 207, this is the insulin access amendments. This passed out of the House Health and Human Services Committee, so it's waiting for a vote on the full House. So if you remember that one helps folks who it provides essentially a cap for those who have insurance on the cost of insulin.
Yeah.
Great. Katie, any others that you have in your mind? Or
No, I mean, there's the ultrasound bill.
No, that bill's the worst.
Which has not, I'm not sure where, it hasn't gone anywhere. It's not in committee yet, so we will probably be sending out an email at some point.
Is that in the House or the Senate?
That's in the House.
Okay.
Yeah.
An ultrasound bill?
Yeah. So it would require a woman to...
see the face of the baby before.
To get an ultrasound prior to... And also it would require that the it's not a heartbeat, but like the sounds of that early fetal, the early fetus, it have to be played.
It's got to be put to music and then played on repeat for the mom for a couple hours.
Not put to music.
It feels that way.
Like drop fat beat.
But she could request that they turn it down or turn it off. But she's like, they still have to go through the process of like turning it on, and then she's got to hear it, and then they got to turn it off.
It really is. It's a nanny state thing. It's a joke.
Yeah, it's really bizarre.
Okay, so
God, if I were a doctor, I'd be like,
the doctors are like losing their minds over these bills.
Because these legislators are not talking to medical professionals at all running this stuff. Like SB 67, like we just talked about. The folks that actually have to do the cremation of the fetal remains.
Like, dude, you can't do that shit.
Yeah, exactly. You can't do it this way. And so they're not talking to funeral directors. They're not talking to doctors.
Well,
they aren't addressing the cost of who's going to pay for that, like we talked about initially. They're not talking to anybody. They're just running these signal
bills. A part
bills.
of that is that the hospitals are similarly not talking to them. And the reason why, I assume, is because they are nervous or scared. They don't want to do it. They don't want to pick this fight because they think that they can fix it maybe on the background. But the problem is we don't understand the full implications of these bills. They're very complicated, not only just for the woman who is going through the experience themselves, but also like for the hospitals, for the providers, after things leave the hospital, all that kind of stuff. So that's kind of on them as well. Like, they should be stepping up and they're not. So also there's the UMA, Utah Medical Association, which was on the other side of the whole cannabis thing.
Yep. They're the worst. And I think they're largely funded by the LDS Church, aren't they?
Oh, I don't know.
I think they are.
They were against this bill because it was going to be a problem for them. And they worked on the back end issues that they had with the bill with Bramble. And then in the most recent committee hearing on the House side, they changed the bill. UMA didn't know about it. They went back to the issue that UMA had without telling UMA. And so the guy who was there to speak for UMA was on the fly reading through the stuff, reading through what his boss was saying about it, and like trying to advocate for it. But he was so mad.
Yeah.
And he was so discombobulated because he was like, I don't know whether or not I can support this bill. And they got 2 new versions of the bill in that one committee hearing.
Jeez.
And so
What a
by the
mess.
end, and they're like, well, can you support this version? He's like, I don't
know what this version is.
I don't know. First of all, I don't know what it does. I need a minute to digest the changes, and then I have to talk to my people. But you continue to make these changes on the background, and Bramble is not working in good faith with the people who are trying to talk to him and that he's willing to talk to. So
At all.
who knows what version of this bill will eventually pass?
Well, if you want to stay up to date on all of this stuff, like I said before, go to betterutah.org and sign up for daily legislative updates. You will get those each night in your inbox, and you can stay abreast of what's been happening down on the Hill. Also, as also a Better Utah plug, we're going to be down on the Hill on Friday with the ABU folks. Yeah, we're going to have JC Peeps Day on the Hill, and so we'd love to have you come down. We'll be meeting at 10 o'clock in the cafeteria, which is behind the Capitol building. It's in the building to the east.
It's on the east side, yeah.
Yep. Go in there, and we'll be hanging out, getting ready, and then we're going to go through some stuff, and we'll just spend the day on the Hill. It'll be a good time.
Yeah, it will
You
be
have
a
to
good
bring
time.
your own air horn, right? 'Cause
Do not bring an
you-
air horn.
You all will not
You will
be
get kicked
providing
out
those.
of the gallery.
Oh.
Actually,
They search your bag
yeah, they do.
to get into the gallery, not into the actual building,
Yeah,
but to
they-
get into the gallery, they'll search your bag.
But if you do run into Connor Boyack like I did last year, he blow the air horn in his face. 'Cause that-
Oh, don't. Yeah.
She's
no.
no.
Like because this whole abortion thing has like really driving me crazy. On
yeah, where's he at on this?
He told me on Twitter. I tagged Libertas.
Yeah,
he's the ED.
Yeah, he's the ED.
Because Brian King had this amazing Twitter thread about like, if you claim to love individual liberty and bodily autonomy and hate government overreach, you should be
This
speaking
is
out
it,
on
yeah.
this bill. This is the place for you to speak out. It was on the ultrasound bill, and I retweeted it and tagged Libertas, and he responded. He's like, "Well, we don't take on issues of abortion." And also, I don't think this is an overreach. I think that this is fine.
Really?
Yeah, he said
Really?
that, and I was like, okay, well,
Some libertarian you are.
yeah. So then we got
Man.
we got a little bit into it, but I was
And
like,
what
you
is-
guys should oppose this.
What does that mean? We don't take on the issues of abortion? Like, well, there are certain places where government overreach we're just not going to worry about.
So basically, they don't deal with
Yeah.
women's issues, right?
Right.
That's the way I hear that.
Oh, yeah.
We care about the Second Amendment. We care about all the things the dudes care about. But as soon as we're talking about women's bodily autonomy, we draw the line there.
Yep. If you
Crap.
are a libertarian or a member of a libertarian group, and when it comes to the issue of abortion, you don't take it on or stay silent, you are not, in fact, a libertarian. You are just a conservative bro who likes to smoke pot. Like, that's what you are.
Yeah, that's fair.
Oh,
That's a fair take.
I hate those guys.
I hate those guys too. So, all right, Katie, we appreciate you coming on and chatting with us. How many? I think we'll have 2 more weeks.
Mm-hmm.
2 more weeks of the legislature, and then we'll be up. And then we have a special treat coming up. We have a crossover episode with the good folks over at Black Site Podcast. Yes, we're looking forward to that. We're going to be recording that one the week after the legislature ends, and then we'll be posting that in their feed and our feed. So, and of course, it'll be us. The Black Site folks, and you and Chase Thomas from Alliance for Better Utah.
Nice.
Thank you so much for coming on.